Right, well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our session, which is all about making more from less. An interesting ask, particularly in today's climate. So we're going to kick off by just giving you a quick overview of who we are and why we're stood up in front of you. So my name's Mark O'Brien. I am Chief Operating Officer in a 330-place maintained special school in West London. I am also the representative for the Institute of School Business Leadership on the Schools and Academies funding group with the government, and I was lucky enough to be nominated and then winner of School Business Leader of the Year last year. So for me, well done. That's a pinnacle. I should retire now, I reckon, because it's all downhill from here. So I'm really happy to be here with some very esteemed colleagues of mine chairing this to cover off this topic with you today. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to give you a quick overview of who they are, where they work, and what's their operating environment and what their job entails. So, Ben.
So, are we on? Yeah, are we on? Brilliant. Yep. So I'm not too sure how I can follow the School Business Leader of the Year at all. So let's just say that again. The School Business Leader of the Year. My name is Ben March. I'm the CFO for Step Academy Trust. There are 20 primary academies within our trust, around about 6,000 children. We're really proud to say all of our schools are good or outstanding. Our key stage 2 results are north of 74% across the trust. We employ about 1,000 staff, and we enjoy the challenges that every school day brings, as I'm sure we all do.
Okay. I'm Caroline Munro. I'm Head of Finance at Advanced Learning Partnership, which is based in and around the Durham area in the northeast. We've got 22 schools, so we've currently got a mix of 9 secondaries and 13 primaries. Very diverse makeup of schools. We've got some very small rural schools. We've got some really big kind of inner city secondaries as well.
Good afternoon. I am Benedict Yu. Can you hear me well? Yeah? I'm Benedict Yu. I am CFO in a multi-academy trust. We've got 31 schools, largely based in Oxfordshire. We've got 20 primaries, 10 secondaries, and 1 alternative provision.
Good afternoon. I'm Robin Harrison from Rushford Spencer Academy in Nottingham. My title is Facilities Resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll start again. Robin Harrison, Rushford Spencer Academy in West Bridgford in Nottingham. Title Facility and Resources Manager. Semi-retired, so I'm passing the baton on to colleagues later in the year. We're a large 18 to 11 secondary school, 2,000 plus pupils, part of a 26-school multi-academy trust, lots of expansion work. I'm surrounded by finance professionals, and here I am as an estates person, thinking why?
We need experts.
Well, apart from salaries, utility costs and energy costs and your planned and preventative maintenance forms the next biggest part of your spend. And woe betide you if you don't spend it on health and safety, because there's a man in a wig or a woman in a wig out to get you if you get it wrong. So it's important that you get your facility spends right. Like Mark, though I'm slightly older, I was surprised and honoured to be Estates Manager of the School Awards in 2023, so further back than that.
Excellent. Okay, well, hopefully you now have a brief insight into who we are. We're all going to be here after the session, so do come and target one of us if you want to have a quick chat about anything. But before we get into the meat of the session, so we know who you are, just by way of show of hands, can you just put your hand up if you're from an academy setting? And quick show of hands if you are from maintained. Great. Any independents among us? Excellent. Good to have you here. How many of you are from mainstream education? And how many from special? Any AP or other? No? Okay. How many from mixed? So you're from an academy trust that has a number of different schools in the mix. Okay. All right. So that gives us hopefully a flavour of the audience that we're talking to. So we're going to go through now some topics. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end. But hopefully as we go through, we're going to be sharing with you some insights that are helpful, that are positive. It's easy to dwell on the negatives, I think, at the moment, particularly when we're building our budgets. But we're going to go through a few bits and pieces that will hopefully give you some insight into how we go about understanding, structuring, looking at our budgets, our schools, and how we drive more from less. So to get us underway, Ben, I'm going to come to you first, please, if I may. How do you go about as a trust, getting to understand your trust and then planning as a consequence from that? What areas is it that you look at as a trust in order to get the most out of the money that you are given?
So I think the first thing that we had to do was define what we wanted for our schools. So we had to define what we meant by excellence. So STEP Academy Trust, as I said, I work for Striving Together for Excellence in Partnership. We had to define what we meant by excellence. So what does excellence mean in the classroom? What does it mean in the school meal? What does it mean in terms of the premises? Across a whole range of areas, around about 30 areas. Once, as a leadership group, we defined what we thought excellence looked like in each of those areas. We then asked the schools to assess where they were against those areas. And then when we had that assessment in place, we could see the schools that were quite far away from the assessment of excellence, those that were closer. That enabled us to put schools together in terms of working together, but also helped us to prioritise our resources in terms of where needed the most attention.
And Benedict, I'll come to you, because you're relatively similar sized trusts, I think, aren't you? So is there anything that you would add to what Ben said there to help drive those?
First of all, I completely agree with Ben. When you don't have enough money, you need to be more strategic in the way you allocate your resources. So we start with really being clear about what you value, and then really measure what you value rather than valuing what you can measure, which has been the case for the last the last decade. So, but apart from that, I think where we've all been using integrated curriculum financial planning, which is a kind of needs-based budgeting. So I think the big tickets in terms of saving are really around your staff deployment, when 80% of your expenditure are staffing deployment. You really need to focus on this, so at least on teaching staff deployment, which is about 50-55%, depending whether you are primary or secondary. I have to say now we are really reaching very tough decisions where we need to really choose between the less worse situation, narrowing the curriculum or increasing class sizes or getting the teachers to teach more. We tend to choose things that you can reverse, like a group size, other things that you can't really change easily, like cutting the Friday afternoon, for example. So there are decisions you need to make, but I think generally we do that in collaboration with the schools. So we are here in the central team to provide the tools and the expertise. But what I'm not here to prescribe, so we've got all sorts of tools. I forgot to say that I also cover data, which is proving very helpful to get the broad range of indicators in the school, not just the financial indicators, but being able to corroborate this with HR, with governance, with stakeholder surveys. You get all sorts of qualitative and quantitative data that are helping you to build a picture. And then you put on top of this all your strategic objective, and you really start to build your budget from that. So for example, we had a significant rise in the number of teaching assistants due to the rise in SEND. So we've completely changed our approach on this. We looked at workforce redesign. We realized that having what we call sometimes one-to-one Velcro TA doesn't necessarily improve outcomes. So we've really worked in tandem with our inclusion team to try and see what works best, to measure the impact of the interventions, to see what adds value, what doesn't add value. And we managed to really stabilize the number of TAs in our primary schools this year. It's a cultural shift for primary schools, I have to say, but it has been working quite well. It's also important to work in partnership with your local authorities on this kind of things. And then when it comes to more the back office functions, well, just before us there was a talk from the Dixon story. So I think, in terms of order, I think we started with ICFP, and we are all at the point where we've optimized our staffing resources. Then we moved on to rationalizing procurements, but I think we are now there, and if they can keep the costs at the same level, that will already be a big achievement, because with the NI increase and the rise in minimum wage, it's going to be challenging on that front. investment income has been quite a saver in the last 2 years, and we use that to redistribute the funds to schools having different types of need as a way of redistributing the wealth. And now we are focusing a bit like Dixon, but we are a bit behind them in terms of operating model redesign, trying to really understand, map out all our processes, assess where there are duplications, what we could automate, etc. But I have to say we are not necessarily black and white in terms of centralization or decentralization. Yes, we need to move to some kind of shared services, but we tend to really analyze where the service is best positioned depending on the knowledge required and the expertise required. And when you look at this pyramid of knowledge, the more you go up, the more the knowledge is lost. So he's trying to build that common framework, those non-negotiable, and then it's probably coming later, your question, actually. Sorry. But
you can cover the whole presentation in 5 minutes now if you want.
So I better shut up. It's really trying to map all your processes and to really try to optimize all your processes.
Yeah. So to bring Caroline in on that point, then, if now we're saying, we understand our individual schools and we understand the trust. How do you go about, particularly maybe in a finance context, how do you go about balancing the needs and the interests of the individual schools versus the trust entire?
Yeah, so we really, I think even before they've joined the trust, we will have carousels, so they come in, and we do have a central services team. They'll come in, the governors will come in, the school leaders, they'll all come in and meet us all individually, ask the questions that we want. We then look at going out to the schools, so individually as different departments will go out to the schools and really understand the context of that school. We've even got little top trumps which were tested on for our schools, so it has demographics in there, it has the number of pupils in there. I think it is just key for everybody in that central team not to lose sight of what is actually going on in the schools. Again, investment that has really helped us this past year that we've been doing it, to allow us to really invest where we need to. So whether it's a school that is rural and they have transport issues, we'll then put free transport in, but it's paid, or it's the investment strategy allows us to do that. It might be a small primary where we know there's issues with SEN and with funding and the lagged funding from it. So again, we can look at using the investment without taking away from other schools within the trust.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of top trumps being used as a school business management tool. I might nick that. Just a curiosity on that then, who actually defines the metrics that went on the top trump card?
I think collectively, probably the CEO, heavily supported by the CFO.
And who's responsible for creating and quality assuring the data that's used in that?
The data team,
Data team. So that's set aside from individual schools, and that's a trust-wide.
Yeah. So it's in conjunction with them, but I think like I said, it's really easy as a central team to become commercialised and to not understand what is going on in individual schools. And I think we've got to appreciate that, in an ideal world when we're sat there saying, well, you will do this and you will do that, that's not always the case when you've got a million different things going on in the school. And
So Robin, coming to you, and if we're now kind of saying that we know the needs, and we maybe know some things that collectively we're doing well or not, how as an organisation, maybe from the FM point of view, but more broadly resource management, how do you go about ensuring there is compliance and to an extent standardisation that kind of goes hand in hand with that, and allowing schools still to have their autonomy to actually direction set, have individuality, have uniqueness about what they do still?
Yes, it's important to recognise that each school is individual and the needs will be different. You mentioned the knowns. What we don't have is the unknown unknowns. So you don't know what's happening to your drains, for example, unless you've had a survey. If our top priorities as estates professionals is to keep schools safe, open, compliant and a brilliant learning environment so that children can achieve progress, the compliance and safety aspects are largely taken care of by your revenue budget and the utilities budgets. And that's your reactive maintenance and your planned preventative maintenance. Your planned preventative maintenance you know about because you've got the historical data on what that's been. You're reactive, you don't know till it happens, so it's about making sure there's a contingency for that to happen. and that's about the central finance team that sets the budgets being aware of that, and the estates teams pushing the case for that to be sufficient. At the end of the day, safety and compliance have to happen. So if you overspend on those, something else has to give. So it might be that you have to not do a project that you plan to do because something's broken that has to be repaired to keep the school open. Looking further ahead, your main challenges for things like sustainability, net zero agenda, improving the school, seeking efficiencies through improving the school environment and structures, usually requires capital spend. And that's all about having a strategic estates plan that allows for this. I have a mantra, and that is always have more projects than money. And that's about making sure that everything that we identify as a need through data, through surveys, through condition reports, through pupil voice or staff voice as well, is logged and recorded and a business case made that justifies what the cost is, what the outcomes will be, what the ongoing cost and potentially ongoing savings might be, and what are the benefits arising from that. And we treat that as a 5-year estates plan where we prioritise them. So 1 and 2, legal compliance, keep the school open, and then the rest of equal value. Now, if you're trying to target strategic projects, see if you can tick several boxes. So if it keeps you legally compliant, makes the teaching and learning environment better, saves you money, for example, by having a better lighting system, it ticks several boxes. So that means it's got a strong business case. We've rolled that strategy out as a trust across all the 8 secondary schools, 16 primaries and 1 special school. We all use that same methodology. We have to submit our 5-year estates plan well before a budget is set, and then it is locked down, and then we find out sort of February, March time what we've got, and then you follow your plan. But you've got a business case for everything you do and a justification for how you do it.
Okay, thank you for that. So moving us on to what I believe to be the key resource for any organisation, particularly in an educational context, is the people we employ. And they are, for me, the driving force behind all that is good in a school, or indeed all that is bad. And so how do we, and this is an open question to all of you, how do we go about harnessing that in terms of making more from less? Have you got any top tips? I don't really like that phrase, but have you got any top tips around how we engage our workforce to help move the conversation forward?
So yeah, for me, with all my experience in doing deficit recovery plan, it always comes down to leadership in a school. We can improve processes, we can improve operating models, we can do all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a good teacher in the school to implement that, it's not going to work. So yeah, I think it's very important to co-design all these plans with them so that they can get better ownership. It's very important to be very transparent on the financial realities on the ground and communicate very regularly to explain why we are taking those decisions. Not to work in silo as well. Sometimes there is a tendency when you try for efficiency reason to centralize things, to work in silo. So it's trying to keep that holistic view of the school. So we tend to have a team around the school with pulling the different expertise from the center. What I do as well a lot is involve the governors, with the local governors. I train them 3 times a year, and for me they are my free resources to hold the teachers to account. And sometimes they tend to listen more to from their governors and then to me. So and there is that change management as well. And I don't think we are particularly good at that in the math sector, at change management. And sometimes the good thing to do is to bring resources from outside so that they can have an independent view and they are more independent. So for example, we are using CJK for our operating model review.
Yeah, so if I can come in on that, you mentioned about change management, and change either succeeds or fails on the people that do the day-to-day jobs. And so I was just kind of wondering, in terms of, you've got that linear scale, haven't you, of people that are the early adopters, but also very comfortable with change, and other people that want to know what's happening minute by minute, hour by hour. So in terms of overcoming apathy, because getting more out of the juice out of the orange, as they say, depends on bringing the people with us. So I think I've certainly encountered some staff saying this is just a tick box exercise and management know what they're already going to do anyway, so what does it actually matter what I have to say? How do you overcome that in terms of trying to bring people with you so that you've got buy-in that is sustained across that change agenda?
So I think that's an excellent question. I think one of the things the sector could be better at is more courageous conversations. So within STEP, we very clearly define what individual roles are. So just to pose that question, the head teacher in your school, are they best placed to judge your catering contract? Do they know how an office runs? Can they manage IT? And the answer to those questions is no, no, and no. And yet, in so many structures, they still retain that level of authority and that level of control. To me, that's ridiculous. And so I put that to the test and recently completed my MPQH to see actually what is there within the course that teaches a head teacher how to run all of these very complex services. And you'll be surprised to know that there is nothing within those courses that enables a head teacher to appropriately and professionally run those services. So in terms of change management, the first thing we have to do is be honest about our starting point. Honest around actually the head teacher is there to lead teaching and learning. There's a whole wealth of experience behind that can then enable and facilitate and make that experience better. But ultimately the head teacher is there to lead teaching and learning. And all of these other roles should be there to support them. So change management, coming back to your point, is being honest with staff around saying this is what we're trying to get to, which then helps with the head teachers who don't want to work in that environment. So if a head teacher really does want to look after the premises and unblock the toilets and choose what's on the menu, there's plenty of other schools out there to go and work in. But if you actually came into education to teach and educate children, then STEP's probably going to be the place for you as a head teacher. And that level of honesty and openness then brings staff with you as you're changing processes.
I wonder, have any of you got an example of how staff engagement and listening to your staff has actually led to a tangible resource benefit for either an individual school or the trust?
Yeah. We have sustainability networks across the trust. So each school sends a lead, and actually we found like tapping into those from a financial perspective has led to efficiencies. So really getting them to buy in, because it is great, like you said, you can speak to head teachers, you can pass the message on to them. If everybody's passing their messages to them, that's where the bottleneck is. So actually kind of speaking to other people. We've got admin networks, sustainability networks, different networks that we tap into people within the school who can be a real champion for what we're saying. And with reduction in energy costs, and actually getting the buy-in from our site staff that are actually thinking, oh, do you know what? I can see the bigger picture. I can see the impact it's having, as opposed to just thinking it's not going to make that much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, an example that I would share that was actually so light touch and actually led to some really good outcomes is I've seen it in a few places. Just the recruitment route of refer somebody that you know. Your staff are your biggest advocates, your biggest mouthpieces. And how many times have you sat in an interview, you think, 5 seconds in, this person is not the one for us, and yet you've got another 45 minutes of your life to have to spend in that interview. But actually, by having people that know people out there that know good quality and are your mouthpiece, okay, I think £250 I think is one of the standard kind of refer a friend benefit after completion of probation, I hasten to add. That actually it's worth its weight in gold. So I'm going to move us on now, and Robin, I'm going to come to you, please. Talking about resource management in terms of long-term investment, which I think is a particularly pertinent thing in terms of facilities. So that kind of long-term investment versus growth versus kind of the more immediacy of, oh my God, I've got to try to make cash flow work for the next report. How do you go about identifying those short and long-term priorities, both at a local and a more kind of macro level for the trust? And how do you balance those things?
Balancing very carefully, but with great difficulty. That's a lot of questions all in one go, so I'll try and take them a bit at a time. I've partly referred already to the strategic estates plan. That's basically a spreadsheet kind of document. It's a vehicle to thinking. To decide what goes on your plan, you've got to, and we've referred to this already, have the right data and right knowledge. So the sorts of data you need is information on what are the demographic trends in my school area or within my trust. Am I looking at a space shortage? Am I looking at multiple pupils coming in the coming years? Or am I looking at a gap and underutilised resources? Am I going to need to add capacity? Or am I going to have to start to think about decisions on reducing capacity? So that's a lot down to the pupil planning data that you'll get from your local authority, tinged with what you also know about what the other trends in the area, such as the housing bills. We've just had an 1,800 home housing estate bill sent to the school. That brought with it 4.6 plus indexation of Section 106 money, which we used as part of our capital investment programme. Add that to the basic need money that came by the local authority from central government, and we've got most of the money we needed to do a lot of the work on our master plan for how we would expand to meet the oversubscribed nature of the site. But that wasn't enough, so the Trust also had to think about where else do we get the money, and that's where the Trust capital allocation came in, where they've had to help as well. So long-term data, you've got your a range of estates information, all sorts of surveys, condition surveys, periodic electrical inspections, whole list of them. That all informs what you want to do or what needs to be done. And as I said before, you're looking at ticking multiple boxes. How do you make that consistent across the estate is the Trust Estate Director having an overview and having a brave conversation with the CEO about what ones are important.
Can I answer?
Did you want to?
So estate is obviously one of the key things you need to plan long term, but there are many other areas, and it's very important to keep different strategic horizons, even though we've got financial pressures. On the curriculum, for example, it's very important to prepare our young people to the jobs of tomorrow. On the IT side, with the digital transformation, you really need to think about your digital strategy and how you are going to fund that. In terms of HR, need to think about succession planning. When we look at the aging of the profession, and particularly school business professionals, we really need to train some new ones in the pipeline. Career pathways is also something very important. Pupil planning, with the decline in pupil numbers, you need to really plan early. So all those things require planning. If you don't want to take difficult decisions down the line, I hear a lot of colleagues really making cuts, making people redundant. Sometimes perhaps they've got good reasons for that, but I think the key is really to anticipate, and the more you anticipate, the more you can really manage and adapt and reskill people, etc., rather than having to cut jobs.
Yeah.
And I think that we hear a lot about return on investment, don't we? And I wonder, Caroline, what would you say about the timeline that you'd put on that, and what is the rate of investment that you would seek to achieve with some of the longer term pieces that you need to make a decision on?
Yeah, so from a staffing perspective, we work on a 2-year cycle. So we're very much we're never making them knee-jerk reactions. We're always looking kind of ahead. It might be that, numbers have gone down this year, but next year they're going to go up. So how can we balance that, and how can we try and balance the books? So we do let schools within the Trust set deficit balances as long as we can see that there's a way out of it, whether that's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. But for us, it's also kind of how the Trust works across the board. So if we've got staff in one school, and we know that we're going to have to look at making cuts, can they be redeployed to other schools? Can we give them that opportunity? We've just introduced that actually we will allow them to go and have a 3-month try before you buy, and if they decide that it's not for them, we will then, we'll honour the redundancy package that was set out to begin with.
And Ben, just coming to you, it occurs to me that, as I've already touched on a couple of times, staff are so important. I just wondered your thoughts on the role of organisational culture and collective mindset. How important do you feel that is in achieving the more from less question?
It's impossible to achieve without that mindset. I think one of the things so as an Academy of Trust, we're required to produce financial statements every year. One of the things that I think could and possibly should be on there is goodwill. And actually that goodwill of staff across the piece needs to be factored in, because colleagues will do a lot of work for you outside of the job description. I know I would, I know my colleagues would do, and we don't really measure that, quantify that, and the risk is because we don't, we therefore then subconsciously stop valuing it. So around having the right attitudes within the trust is around, first of all, making sure that they're there within the leadership team. So we make sure that if staff go above and beyond, they will receive an acknowledgement of that, not necessarily financial, because we can't do that, but it would be around a thank you email. It's stopping, having a conversation with an individual, but mostly it comes around employing the right people in the first place, and making sure that actually if you really want to work with this person, you'll find a job for them, and it doesn't matter what the CV looks like. Actually, if they're not the right person for the trust, there's no point in employing them.
Okay, great. Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, from an estates perspective, I can't emphasise enough of, if you could possibly find a way to afford one, of investing in a facility specialist. School caretakers are a thing of the past. It's such a multi-skilled, complex area. There's so many areas involved that it's a minefield, and it's really hard to recruit really good people to that. So investing in competent people is great. Where do we find them? Well, we're sometimes finding that the youngsters looking for first jobs, can I work from home? Not on school estates, you can't. Is there an app for it? Yes, it's good. It's a compliance app. It will do all the work for you, log it all for you, but you have to use it, you have to understand it. So there's a knowledge transfer to be done. If you can't find the right individuals, don't be afraid of using some of the agencies out there who specialise in certain areas, whether it be SEN or site or finance specialist or teachers if you're short of them, because you've almost got to try before you buy. And in that sense, you can find good people who can demonstrate competency in the job, in the workplace. Then you pay them a transfer fee to take them off the agency books and buy them. And you've probably saved yourself a lot of time in terms of advertising and interview time as well. Beyond that, training for the future. As I mentioned, I'm not far off retirement now. For the last 2 or 3 years, I've been investing my time in developing my successor. I call it gardening. You feed them information and you water them and you see them grow. And you don't make the decisions for them, but you can point them towards what solutions might be open to them. And I now have a replacement who's doing my job, and I'm just concentrating on the final close of the master plan work. So that's worked for us. What we've done in terms of investing in it is we've used the apprenticeship levy to fund training at a level 4 facilities management qualification that will lead to membership of the Chartered Institute of Facilities and Workplace Management. You'll become a qualified estates professional. And you can't beat that. But those are transferable skills within the school and within the trust.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move us on to another topic, because efficiency and effectiveness, particularly in a financial context, in this day and age, that conversation can't happen without discussion of AI, big data, how we use analytics. We've touched on management reporting, what have you. We were speaking before about ICFP and integrated curriculum and financial planning metrics that we can use. But for me, one of the big things that I have seen over the years, particularly in the work that I've done for the department through the School Resource Management Advisor Programme, is that kind of lack of strategy and lack of driving decision-making through a really, I guess, a wealth of understanding, evidence-based understanding decision-making from your organisation. So I just wondered, as maybe sort of almost a final point, because I want to leave a few minutes. I know you're all dying to ask lots of questions, and I want to get to some of those. I just wondered, have you got anything to say on how you'd go about, or how you do go about, monitoring your organisation holistically to ensure you're not stockpiling a massive, great big balance, but yet the ceilings are falling in, or conversely, you've not got 15 TAs in every class and financially coming unstuck?
Well, you can start. Yeah. So first of all, I think you said data is not just used to measure results. I think it's a lot more proactive than that. I think we use data to intervene early, to personalize the learning. So it's very proactive. you mentioned the magic word efficiency. Efficiency means output, how much output you get divided by the input, so how many resources you put in. And at the moment, we tend to measure the cost of things. So even if you measure the end-to-end cost of a function, adding the cost in a school plus the cost in the center, is still the cost of something. It doesn't look at the impact or the outcome you are getting. So I think we need more and more to measure impact, to measure the real efficiencies by looking at the broad range of data. But having common systems, I think, is the first starting point to be able to gather data at consolidated level. And then I think you need to be able to, where we've done a dashboard around the 5 pillars of a strong trust, so that we can really pull out data from different sources. The timeliness and technology has been a revolution on this. The timeliness and the accuracy of the data, having data in real time, it really helps you to monitor more effectively and to take decisions more quickly. That's my advice in terms of.
Yeah, I think in education we do a fantastic job of making things really complicated when actually they're quite simple. They're quite straightforward. So let me just give a small example around stationery. Where do you currently buy your stationery from, as a school or as a trust? Well, increasing numbers are buying it from Amazon. Okay, yeah. The most efficient way, the most effective way, the most economic way? No, but the most convenient. Why? Because we're coming off a post-COVID world. But how much stationery do you actually need in a school in terms of variety? So at STEP, we've done that analysis, and we believe that a classroom needs 7 different things. So what did we do? We went to the best supplier that I think there is for stationery, HBS. That's a plug for HBS, Half Moon Group. The guy you want to speak there is Selwyn. Tell him Ben mentioned you, you'll get a good deal. Have we done the plug? Brilliant.
So will Ben.
That's it. I'm not on any commission. Selwyn, HBS. They've been able to identify our products that our teachers and children have tested, and guess what? We've bought them. And we've bought them at a much reduced price. And now, because everybody's using the same consistent product, we know what we're buying each year. Do you know how much that saved this year? This time last year, we had spent £150,000 on stationery with HBS. This time this year, we've spent 20. That's a significant real saving by keeping things simple. But also it comes back to the point that I mentioned earlier around making sure that people are doing the right job. So if it is that your head teacher is allowed to decide to buy things off Amazon, then you have to have the honest conversation about why they can't afford the TA, because they're buying from the wrong place. If you respect the disciplines of individuals and professionals within the trust that you're working in or within the network of schools, then go with that. So that would be a real-time example that we could give.
Okay, great, thank you. I mean, one experience I'll share with you for being an SRMA for the last 8 years is the amount of times that I say the word savings, and there's almost like an allergic reaction to the concept of savings. I'm yet still to come up with a one word that's the opposite of savings. The best I can do is wastings, but that's not really the right word. But for me, it's not about taking money away from a school or a particular class or a child indeed, and giving it back to Rachel Reeves. It's about how do we use that money to the biggest impact for the children that we're here to serve. So
how do we invest it? That's the term we use within STEP. How are we going to invest the money better? And that moves the savings into an area where we're focusing our investment.
And then a pound becomes more than a pound.
I think an aspect that we haven't mentioned yet is income generation. And are we making the best use of our resources, our facilities, to bring in money that we wouldn't otherwise be able to get? Your lettings can be a huge lifesaver to your budget if you've got the opportunity to maximise that. And again, if you haven't got the expertise, there's lots of companies out there will do that for you for a fee. That fee is probably less than it's going to cost you to employ a letting specialist on your payroll on your own account. Typically 15% of income will be their fee. The bigger ones charge more if they're taking on FM compliance as well, but you should be able to do that yourself if you're big enough.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to open it up to questions, and just to encourage you to ask some questions, because often at this point it's swing doors, tumbleweeds. There is no stupid questions, and as an SRMA who allegedly knows what he's talking about, according to the award last year, one of my favourite questions to ask, and I asked it in a DFE meeting not so long ago, is what is 1% of my budget? and everyone looked at me as if, what are you talking about? But there are so many grants that stop and start. There are so many uncertainties about what the future holds for our funding that actually, for me, sometimes the most basic questions are often the most helpful to ask. So please, I open it now to anyone that has a question.
Sorry, Carla Bradshaw, Loton School, and also an SRMA. The question I have is to find out how you deal, particularly in a trust format, when resources are getting tighter and a falling role, a national issue of falling roles. So those of you who've got smaller schools, how are you managing that actually? Have you got something like a break-even point, or you know it's not going to work anymore, or how are you managing that conversation, both with an individual school but also within the trust?
How are we managing falling roles?
Yeah, we've got an awful lot of falling roles, especially being rural. I think it's really drilling down into what the actual spend is, and I think it is really important that you do, schools do understand that. And I think the amount of, when we take on new schools, the subscriptions they've got that are duplicated across different departments, and it might be that the maths lead left 4 years ago, but we're still paying for that one, but we've changed to something else. So I really do think it's drilling down, understanding where everything is being spent, and not just think it. Often it's the smaller spends that add up to make the biggest impact.
I think there's that. I think there's also, we are never going to have enough income as a sector when we base our expenditure on our income. We're never going to have enough. So we need to go back to basic financial principles, which is how much does this school actually cost to run? And that's what we did with InStep. We've got an equitable funding model, and that model has enabled us to cope with a pupil number reduction from 93% across the trust to now 85%, and at the same time rebuild our reserves from 500,000 to over 3 million, because we focused on what does it cost to run the school, not what income does the school have.
Yeah, I would add just two small things. One, it's important to work in partnership with the local authority on place planning, and not to try and do a lot of marketing to steal the pupils from another school, because we are all in here together. So be very proactive in terms of managing your PAN. But second point, I think there is a moral issue and something the government need to think about preserving countryside schools in some places, because it's the viability, it's the life of a village, and I think they would need to change the funding model by perhaps increasing the lump sum to make sure that the school can cover their fixed costs, because we've got schools with 70 kids or with 80 kids. We want to keep them alive, but financially it's very difficult. So yes, you can look at how you cut the pie, but the problem to take money from Paul to pay Peter, when Paul is also is struggling, it is becoming more difficult. So I think, we need to work with the government to. Again, it comes back to values. Do we really want to preserve the schools in our countryside, and then design a funding model that is allowing this?
You know, I would add that whatever your problem is, one of the key things for me is communication. About once you've figured out what it is you're going to do about it, even if you're kind of, I don't know whether this is going to be right or wrong, tell people what you're going to do. You know, tell them it again and again. Communicate regularly, frequently, clearly. Differentiate. You know, segment your audience. Talk to them in a different way that's relevant to them, whether it be governors, parents, staff, pupils, your wider stakeholders. Whatever your problem is, we get through it together, or we fail together. And so bringing people with you on that journey is really very important. Is there any other questions at all? Yeah.
I wondered if any of the panel have got any innovative ways of recruitment at the moment. We're struggling to recruit site staff. We're 30 minutes down the road from this location. Agency fees are astronomically high. And I wondered if you had anything, I don't know, more radical.
If I can address the estates one, we have the same problem. We found traditional advertising just wasn't getting anybody in. We did use an agency one, and we found a really good one. Unfortunately, we were able to make a decision on it very quickly, so we didn't end up paying agency fees for a prohibitively long period of time. But I think it's also about being creative about how we let people know that opportunities exist. So traditional newspaper adverts don't work anymore. Social media, school newsletters, word of mouth. I'm not really of the TikTok generation, but using social media or whatever the current methodologies are seems to reach more people. We have to make recruitment into education as a whole attractive. And that's about recognising site staff, but all school staff as professionals, and accrediting them as such, and then letting it be known that it is a profession that is rewarding and recognising and fulfilling, but also aspirational and respected. And I think that's a marketing job we need to do as a profession.
Yeah,
But do you want to come in?
we've got a teaching school which helps to provide the pipeline of teachers. We are starting a teacher apprenticeship program in September as well, so that they are paid, so that it really helps to make some career moves without having the university debt. We've got a creative solution in terms of supply with a mutual, so that we get our pool. We are lucky, we've got all our school within, more or less within the same perimeter. So we've been able to develop some creative pool of supply, non-making with a non-making profit organization. We looked at supply apps as well, so that you can, it's a bit like Uber for staff, so that you can match supply and demand. So there are some solutions, but yes, there is a recruitment crisis. Perhaps the fall in pupil numbers will help.
Quickly, because I want to take one more question.
From the estate's perspective, I think tapping into like military programs where people are coming out of the military, that's a really good one as well. But looking at the apprenticeships and really, for me, I think, wouldn't it be brilliant if we had access to all these children and we could tell them about different careers in schools and celebrate? It would be great. But again, like looking at school leavers, I don't know what age your children are, but.
And for me, I hate to say it, but the one thing is social media. It is unfortunately the way of most things are going. Right, last question. Thank you.
Hi, Dan Worth from TES Magazine. Income generation has been mentioned a couple of times on another panel I saw earlier. How well understood is that in the sector? Is it almost like a dirty word, a dirty phrase? Are people getting more advanced and mature in that? Some school head teachers resistant to the idea of letting out their school on a weekend? Because it sounds like everyone says it's the lifeline. So is everyone doing it, or is it a bit of a battle sometimes still?
I think it's poorly done, Dan. I also think that people don't really realise the cost of the income generation. So they'll see, we've hired this out for £100 today. Yep, but you've had to pay the site staff £70 and you've had to top up the toilets. And by the time you've run it out, you've actually cost the school. So I think there's a linkage there. I think schools can be a better place for the community and actually open up a forum for some religious organisations, but then the school has to question whether it wants to be associated with those religious organisations. Then that brings it into a whole different world. I think something that Benedict mentioned earlier needs to be spoken of a lot more, which is how we invest our sums, because the sector as a whole is cash rich. You can see that, but we're not receiving our return on investment at all as a sector. Would it work if say Benedict and I worked together and put our pool together of reserves, and then we shared out the income? We've got someone here from Lloyd's looking at me with his eyes lighting up. Is that something that we could do as a sector? Definitely, and then it's money from the money markets, not from anywhere else. So I think, Dan, to answer the question, we need to be a lot more business-like in our approach. It's not about hiring it out for birthday parties and hoping you get 50 quid back. It's about using all of the money within the sector to generate money back again.
What you want is long-term, regular, reliable lettings and multiples of them on the same night, so your staffing is spread thinly across multiple income streams. Can I just give one very quick example and then I'll shut up permanently?
You got 20 seconds.
We inherited a rundown hockey field. We involved a sports lettings company to invest in a new grass pitch, 3G pitch for it, new floodlights, new fencing. They have a lease. They have the operating maintenance costs. We are on a minimum income guarantee. We have a first-rate facility at no cost to us that the community benefits from.
30 seconds.
Trying to finish. I think, as Ben mentioned, we need to build that sense of collective responsibility and not to expect everything from top down. And in order to do that, they need to leave to the system enough freedom with accountability. But once you work in a local area, it's really working together. So working with issues outside, beyond the school gate as well. So we are about to develop the cradle to career model to try and involve other civic actors locally, which to try and tackle those issues. So bottom up is really the answer when you don't have enough resources and flexibility.
Well, I'll just conclude by saying, for me, one of the big challenges of schools and education broadly is what is our main purpose? Our main purpose is to educate children, and yet we are having more and more responsibilities and diversified areas of activity placed on us. So, risk versus reward. Anyway, that's it from us. It's been lovely to talk to you today. Thank you for these 4 wonderful people on our panel, and thank you for listening.